Welcome back to the show. Today I want to share some thoughts with you on what failure teaches. Now, I can remember way back when I was in first grade, I went to Baltimore City schools, and my first grade teacher told all of us to copy some information on the chalkboard. So I copied the information on the chalkboard, and I can remember she said, do it exactly like it's written on the chalkboard. Now, I will not pretend to tell you that I'm the brightest bulb in the room, because I'm definitely not. However, she said it a couple times, copy it exactly like I have it on the board. So, of course, a chalkboard is only so wide, right? And a piece of paper is probably wider than the chalkboard. So what I did was, again, she said over and over again, exactly like I have it on the board. So she had the information on the board, but she said exactly. So when she ended with a word on the board, I ended with a word on the board, and I went to the next line on my paper. So my paper was like half as wide as it should have been because I did exactly what she told me to do. Well, when she graded that information, I can remember as clear as it happened yesterday, she put a big orange, we're talking in the 1970s, an orange U for unsatisfactory. And I was humiliated. I didn't realize, why would she mark me unsatisfactory when I was doing exactly what she said that I was supposed to be doing? Obviously, I wasn't thinking properly and probably a few nuggets short of a Happy Meal. But that was really one of my first introductions to failing, or being, at least in my mind, as a 6-year-old, failure. And then in second grade, again in the same city school structure, my second grade teacher would call me Alfalfa, which, for those who don't know, there was a show in the 1930s called The Little Rascals. And in that show, there was a little boy with greased down black hair, and he had a little, I don't know what you would call it, a spar of hair that would stand straight up, and they called him Alfalfa. So she would tease me in front of all the other students that I was Alfalfa. So all during those school years, I was teased until we moved into another area, moved into the county. And then I was harassed in school, those schools, because I couldn't talk right and I was shy and I didn't dress like the other kids and/or have hairstyles like the other kids. So growing up, I felt like I was a failure because I wasn't like everybody else. And I wondered how many times you and I fall into that same mindset, that because we have either failed multiple times, or we feel that we're a failure, or we get judged by other people that really don't know us, then we think that we're failures. So that's kind of the big picture of this show here today. And the bigger picture is that failing is not a bad thing. I can remember when I first started to ride a bicycle. Of course, you would fall over and over again. You know, the parent, generally speaking, doesn't smack the kid around because he falls off the bike multiple times. Or a child that's learning how to walk. You don't beat the kid up because the kid doesn't learn how to walk the first time. But society has us believing that, at least in some circles, that if you don't get it the second, third, fourth, or fifth time, then you must not be meant to do certain things in life. So why are people so afraid of failing? Maybe because they don't know the difference between failing and being a failure. That's a big difference that most people struggle with from day to day. They don't know the difference between failing and failure. Somebody said, I can't remember who said it, they said that failure is an opportunity to do things again, only better. When I was a kid, I had a piano teacher named Phyllis Davis. And Miss Phyllis was a very persistent instructor. And I think I have ADD. I'm pretty hyper and distracted very easily. And she would always tell me that, I think she said that permanent practice makes perfection, or perfect, or something resembling that. That the more you do something over and over again and keep tweaking to make it better every time, it gets a lot easier. I can remember one time in that class, she would teach us something called inversions. And I'm not going to get into the nuts and bolts of how you play a piano, but those inversions, that system of using that structure enables you to move from key to key a lot faster. And I would give her a hard time about learning these inversions because it was a learning curve. And I would mess it up, and I would flub it up. It wouldn't sound very good. And she said, John, if you master these inversions, your ability to play the piano is going to be so much easier because they're actually shortcuts to be able to play beautiful music. So if you think about it, failure is really different than failing. In my world, in my mind, being a failure is somebody who quits and gives up in the middle of their attempt to excel and do great things. So among the advantages, a guy named Jeff, he writes, failure underscores the need to take chances. Again, failure underscores the need to take a chance. The cliche is right. If you take no risks, therefore there will be no rewards. So if you take big risks, almost by definition, he says, you're going to fail at some point. I can't overemphasize the importance of the difference of being a failure and failing. I said it on another show that you're going to fail way more times than you are going to succeed. I thought, I don't know why, but I thought that there were some people, in fact, I thought that there were most people that were born with some level of high intelligence, that everything they tried, or almost everything they tried, they were able to succeed at it in the first attempt, maybe the second attempt. But me, it would take me multiple times to get something done. I thought I was the only one who struggled in that arena, but that is not the case at all. Most successful people, I would venture to say, all successful people struggle consistently over and over again. This author goes on to say, he says, success can breed complacency. If everything goes right all the time, you're less likely to try something new. You and I have a habit of getting into our comfort zone because our comfort zone is where it feels good. It's easy. It's not difficult. You know, you can almost drive your car blindfolded. Don't try that at home, please. But the point is, you don't have to think about it because you've done it so many times. You don't have to think about how to take a shower or how to brush your teeth. You do it all the time. But when we step out and do something that's different, that stretches our comfort zone consistently, then human nature says that I don't want to put myself out there and create a chance that I could fail. So again, success can breed complacency. So failure can force you to rethink every assumption. And let me just pause and throw this out there. That if your why isn't huge, then every time that you fail, you're going to be more likely to give up and not pursue what you're trying to pursue. If you would have seen the first several, we had something called a blog talk show that we did online. It was an audio show, a radio show, and if you would have heard me the first several times, it was really, really bad. And the tendency for me, being an introvert, was to stop, was to not continue doing these shows. Well, to date, about 64,000 people have downloaded those shows. I don't really understand the whole why behind it, but the point is that if your why isn't big, if your why isn't huge, you're not going to be able to push through the struggle and the intimidation of trying to do something that you've never done before. Good judgment really comes from experience, and experience sometimes comes from making big mistakes. Let me share an embarrassing example. Just the other day, we found out that a wheel on our garage door had broken off. So my wife was out doing some things for her mom, and I decided to find the part. And by the way, for those who don't know, I am not handy at all. I'm all thumbs. I am a total klutz when it comes down to fixing things. So I decided that I'm going to take a chance. I want to take a chance. I want to step out of my comfort zone and try to repair this garage door. Well, I repaired the garage door all right, so much so that it couldn't open anymore and it couldn't close. So the door was halfway open, halfway closed. Couldn't get my Jeep out of the garage at all. So I had to phone a friend, as the old TV show was. I called our friend Dale, and Dale luckily that evening came by to fix it. The point is that sometimes you need to attempt great things to do great things. An extended point of this is you don't get really good at doing things unless you do things consistently. And by the way, I'm not going to mess with a garage door again. Now that's probably the opposite of what I just said, isn't it? But I know I'm not going to put myself in that mental state for me again. So experience really is a name that people give to making mistakes. How many times haven't you fallen on your face over and over again, and you say, man, that was either a good experience or a bad experience, because maybe, hopefully, you learned something from it. I've been in business for a long, long time. And most people, I'd say 85, 90% of people that I've worked with and or trained or hired, they don't learn necessarily from their mistakes, so then they quit before they get really good at mastering a certain skill set, like the garage door opener thing, or the garage door. So if I would have the tenacity to stick with learning how to fix garage doors, then I'd be really good at it. But I don't have the tenacity to stick with it, to master how to fix garage doors. Winston Churchill said one time, "Success is not final, failure is not fatal, it is the courage to continue that counts." I think you and I often assume that the people we see on TV that have come through some amazing things, they've overcome some struggles, they have pushed themselves to points of exhaustion, think that they didn't have internal struggles themselves, that they didn't want to quit in the long run. I think you and I, we assume incorrectly that these people have it all together, that they're not struggling internally. I guarantee you that there is a percentage of them that struggle every single day. So many people I've met look at these big-time executives and movie stars, and they assume that everything all fell into place. But if you really read their bios, if you read their history, or maybe dig a little bit deeper into their past, they were in fact not born successes. Now there's a tiny percentage of people that were born into wealthy families. I get that. But the majority of people out there that have succeeded in some great way, that didn't happen by itself. They were able to overcome some substantial changes in their lives as a result of moving forward. Many of my clients are friends, and they're afraid of taking on huge projects because they're afraid of failure. A lady named Kimberly Giles says that identity, or rather, you need to identify the worst case possibility. Identify what's the worst thing that can happen. So imagine yourself in the worst case situation. Is it as bad as your subconscious mind wants to think it is? And chances are you could handle it and you could live through it and be stronger by it. Remember, again, a guy named Ambrose Redmoon writes, "Courage is not the absence of fear, but rather the judgment that something else is more important than fear." Let me share it again. Courage is not the absence of fear, but rather the judgment that something else is more important than fear. That's what's pushed me out of my circle, out of my comfort zone, is there was something beyond my fear that I had to embrace, because life is getting shorter. The older you get, the shorter it gets. Joel Osteen said one time, "You must make a decision that you're going to move on something. It won't happen automatically. You will have to rise up and say, quote, I don't care how hard this is. I don't care how disappointed I am. I'm not going to let this get the best of me. I'm moving on with my life." How many times haven't you fallen on your face and you felt like staying down in the mud because you fell on your face 2,700 times? Think about it a minute. Winston Churchill, again, he says, "Success is stumbling from failure to failure with no loss of enthusiasm." Let me say it again. Success is stumbling from failure to failure with no loss of enthusiasm. You know how hard it is to stay enthusiastic when you keep banging your head against the wall? For me, it's really hard to keep going when you constantly fall on your face and nothing ever happens right for you. Yeah, it's really hard. So decide that living your life to the fullest is more important than not. Randy Pausch wrote before he passed away, he wrote, quote, "The brick walls are there for a reason. The brick walls are not there to keep us out. The brick walls are there to give us a chance to show up and show how badly we want something." Listen, because the brick walls are there to stop the people. Listen again, the brick walls are there to stop the people who don't want it badly enough. They're there to stop the other people. They're there to stop the other people. So how bad do you really want what you say you want? Think about that for just a second or two. How bad do you really want what you say you really want? You have to take action and do something. You have to break out of that comfort zone. And breaking out of the comfort zone is completely opposite of what your brain wants to do, because your brain wants to run the other direction instead of doing what you're supposed to be doing. An old English saying said this: he who never makes mistakes never makes anything. Again, he who never makes mistakes never makes anything. So taking on any positive approach or anything that's new or different, it builds confidence. It does. So when you try new things and be innovative and creative, you'd be surprised how much you'll learn. I mean, your learning curve is going to shrink considerably, because you're stepping out and doing the extraordinary. How many people have you met that have lived to age 80 and 90 years old and really haven't tried anything new in 30 or 40 years? They haven't tried anything new. Every step in the right direction, listen, every step in the right direction makes the next step less scary. If you fail, you make a point to keep going and try again, because if you don't let failure stop you from taking more action, then you won't take fear personally, like I did with the teacher I talked to you about from first grade. I took it personally. I thought, man, there must be something wrong with me because I'm really stupid, because I thought I did exactly what she said to do, but yet I still got a big orange U for unsatisfactory on my paper. Jonathan Brown, he found people that are lacking in self-esteem. Listen, take failure personally. Again, people who are lacking in self-esteem take failure personally. They think it means that they're not smart or competent, or even they come from the wrong side of the tracks. Or confident people understand, it seems, at least in this particular study, that failure is about the issue or the technique, and it isn't about them. That was the difference between, I think, me learning how to play the piano. I realized that if I was going to master playing the piano, I had to master the skill sets that it would take to master the piano. So you can't be a failure. Failure is an event, it's not a person. I think human beings are the only ones who view themselves as failures instead of somebody who hasn't gotten back up again and kept trying every time they fell on their face. Theodore Roosevelt said, "It's hard to fail, but it's worse never to have tried to succeed." Again, I'll say it multiple times. There are multiple people out there who have lived and died and have never really stretched themselves to a point of being extraordinary and doing things that were terrifying. Because when you step out of that comfort zone, when you step out of that bubble, it is terrifying for at least half of us introverts. Seth Godin, the great author Seth Godin, if you haven't gotten his blog, he sends out a blog every single day. Sign up for it. S-E-T-H, Seth Godin, G-O-D-I-N. He says there are some significant misunderstandings about failure. A common one, similar to one we seem to have about death, is that if you don't plan for it, it won't happen. All of us fail. Successful people fail often, and, he says, worth noting, learn more from that failure than everyone else. He says 2 habits that don't help. Quote, number 1, getting good at avoiding blame and casting doubt, and not signing up for visible and important projects. While it may seem like these 2 choices increase your chances for survival or even promotion, in fact, they merely insulate you from worthwhile failures. Can you grow after failing multiple times? Absolutely. But you have to change your mindset if you really want to grow and mature and or evolve. He says, I think it's worth noting that my definition of failure doesn't include being unlucky enough to be involved in a project where random external events kept you from succeeding. Listen, that's the cost of showing up. That's not what failure really means. He says identifying these random events, of course, is part of the art of doing even better. Many of the things we'd like to blame is out of our control and are in fact avoidable, and they can be planned around. So he says there's 6 random ideas that will help you fail better, and by the way, help me fail better. More often than there's going to be a positive upside. He said, number 1, Whenever possible, take on specific projects. Take on projects that you don't know exactly how to do. Again, it's against the human nature to take on a project that you don't have a clue about. But I'd say more times than not that the people that are massively successful in life, there's an old saying that you jump and you build the parachute on the way down. And I read a lot of books, I read a lot of material about people who are very, very smart. And more times than not, they embrace a project before they even really know how to do it. Seth Godin says in number 2, make detailed promises about what success looks like and when it will occur. What does your definition of success look like if you were to master this thing that you're trying to accomplish? Number 3, engage, he says, engage others in your projects. If you fail, he says, they should be involved and know that they will fail with you. Again, it's a village, it's a team, it's a family, if you will. Number 4, be really clear about what the true risks are. Ignore the vivid, unlikely, and ultimately non-fatal risks that take on so much of our focus away. Let me pause on this. Some things you and I don't need to be doing. Some conversations you and I don't need to be involved in because they're going to distract you from doing the things that you really need to be doing anyway. I'm guilty as charged. There's emails that I read that I don't need to be reading. Why do I allow somebody else's agenda and somebody else's priorities to pull me away from tasks that I should be doing for what I need to do? Seth Godin goes on to say, number 5, concentrate your energy and will on the elements of the project that you have influence on, ignoring external events that you can't avoid or change. Number 6, when you fail, he says, and you will, call it by name and outline specifically what you learned so you won't make the same mistakes twice. People who blame others for failure will never be good at failing because they've never done it. Think about that. How many people do you know in your life who blame the world for their stupidity and their failings instead of looking at the person in the mirror? And it's that person in the mirror who ultimately is in charge of their failings. Think about that in your life and my life too. Seth Godin continues. When you fail, and you will, be clear about it, call it by name, and outline specifically, he says again, what you're going to learn from it. If that list frightened you, you might be getting to the nub of the matter. If that list feels like the sort of things you'd like to do for freelancers or employees or bosses to adopt, then perhaps is resonating as a plan going forward for you. In other words, you have to embrace the failure. You have to embrace the fear that goes behind the failure, or at least the potential of failure. I say it in all these shows I do. I have stressed this a lot, that failing doesn't always equate to failure. What happens is you and I stop attempting great things because we fail. Because you and I understand that failing is part of succeeding. And you're going to fail multiple times. Don't worry about the potential of failure because you're going to fail, bottom line. Don't try to blame others when it happens. All of us fail. Massive success, listen, massive success comes by the way of massive failures. I'm sure you've read or heard about it, that the story of 3M's greatest failure was inventing glue that won't stick. That glue became the basis and the foundation for Post-it notes. The scientists of Pfizer were trying to create a medication that treated high blood pressure, but it created another medication for some men. They call it now Viagra. You can only appreciate success after you failed. Some of your biggest mistakes have led to your biggest successes. But if you would have stopped the attempt before that final failing, before you reached the success, you would not have reached your success. So it's important to keep failing in your journey to success, but learning as a result of it. We've learned that Thomas Edison, he failed hundreds of times to create the light bulb, but he kept going. In fact, some people say he attempted up to 1,000 times to get the light bulb to work. I think I would have given up long before 1,000 times. How about you? David Lee Roth wrote one time, he says, you stick your head above the crowd, listen, you stick your head above the crowd and attract attention, and sometimes nobody will throw a rock at you. That's the territory. You buy the land, you get the Indians. Think about that a minute. Most people are afraid of sticking their head out because they're afraid they're going to get shot out, because that's where victory really happens. When you put yourself out, as the old Bible story talks about Peter getting out of the boat and walking on water for a period of time, it is terrifying for most of us to do things that you've never done before. So I'm asking you today to challenge yourself, challenge your fear, challenge your past, challenge your consistent failings in your life to keep going, learning from it, evolve, get better, learn more. And I believe success is right around the corner for you if you don't give up. My name is John Carver. Thank you for watching the show today, and we'll be back real soon. Take care.